Hello, students. Welcome to BioWise with Anchal. Now, this chapter is a matter of concern for some people. So, upon request, I have made this video for your reference. Now, the endocrine system is a very important chapter because hormones are generally asked in the examination. And there is a comparative study of the phytohormones and the human hormones, like, for example, stress hormone and all, is added in the question paper. So, understand in this chapter, the basic important thing that you should know is which hormone is released by which gland, where are these glands located, and what happens when you have hyposecretion and hypersecretion of the um, hormones. Is that clear? So, let us move ahead. Now, in this chapter, what are we going to study? You know that we need to understand about the regulation of the body activities, what is hormonal control, nervous control, endocrine versus exocrine system, general properties of hormones, endocrine glands, location and function. Very, very, very important. Diseases related to the hormones. So why we need the regulation of the body activities? Now, human beings, if you say, or animals, if you say, they are very complex, right? They have to maintain proper time and correct sequence in your body, that what time what should happen in the growth phase. Like for example, if you consider growth, then also you have a certain time when you attain puberty. There's a certain time when the body organs should be mature enough to deal with the conditions around, right? And they are actually active in terms of reproduction, right? And at the same time, when you react, what is a stress condition, how your body reacts under stress, all are related to hormones. Hormones and nervous system plays hand in hand. They go along hand in hand, and they bring out certain actions in our body. What are hormones? Hormones are secretions from specific cells or glands in the body and is carried to all the part through blood. But their effect is produced in only one specific part. That means hormones are not released at the target site. It is released near the gland and it is transported through the blood to the target site. That is what hormones is all about. That is what the difference between enzymes and hormone is. Enzyme is released wherever it is needed. For example, if digestive system certain enzymes are there, so they are released where they are needed. But hormones are released at the glands, endocrine glands, and then they are released in the blood in small amount, and that is traveling through the blood to the target site to bring out the action. Now, what is hormonal versus nervous control? You can easily go through the same. You can understand that hormonal control is basically slow in action, and nervous control is very fast and rapid. Hormonal control is by chemicals through blood, and nervous control is electrochemical, and there are neurotransmitters also present. Then hormonal control affects different organs in the body, but nervous control has particular muscles and glands to control. Hormonal control can affect your growth, but nervous control cannot affect your growth. It brings about the chemical changes and regulate metabolism, and nervous control has no influence on your metabolism. Hormonal control effect is short term and or it can be long term, but nervous control is basically nervous impulses and all are very short lived. And hormonal control cannot be modified by previous experiences. If you have to grow tall by your growth hormone, the growth hormone will make you tall, whatever be the situation. But nervous control, generally, our previous experience helps. If we are aware that this object is hot and it will make us feel, what to say, our finger will burn, then we will not touch it. So, our previous experiences are important for the nervous control. Now, endocrine and exocrine, there are two types of gland. Exocrine is which has ducts or which has pouches where they can store their secretions. But endocrine glands, they secrete their secretions directly in the blood, as I have already told you, and from there it gets transported to the target site. Right, and they are ductless glands. These are the major endocrine systems that we have: pineal gland, pituitary gland, pancreas, ovaries, testes, thyroid gland, parathyroid gland, hypothalamus, and adrenal. Now, hypothalamus is a part of brain, but it plays a very important role in your endocrine system because it controls pituitary. It's a part of brain, it controls pituitary, but pituitary is the master gland. It controls the other endocrine glands. Endocrine, not exocrine, endocrine glands. Okay, so let us move ahead. Endocrine system is a collection of glands that produces hormones that regulate metabolism, growth and development, tissue and sexual functions, even reproduction, sleep, mood, among all the other things that you can think of. The hormone is doing the needful. There are many happy hormones like endorphin, serotonin, dopamine. These are all hormones which makes us feel happy, depressed. Then anxiety, you can talk about excitement. So these are all hormone related activities. General properties secreted from the endocrine glands directly into the blood regulates the physiological processes by chemical means. They act on the target organs or cells. Similar influence in other species. Very small quantity is needed. Biologically very active. Adrenaline 1 part and 300 million parts. That is such a small quantity can bring out changes in our body. Chemically, they can be peptides like insulin, amines like adrenaline, steroids, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and polysaturated fatty acids like prostaglandins, the hormones which makes you feel pain, right? Then excessive or deficiency leads to serious consequences, and it is not stored in the body. So excess of hormone is always released by our excretory system. Okay, overview of the system, systems of the ductless glands. Hormones are called the messenger molecules, the chemical messengers, circulates in the blood, acts on the distant target site. Your pituitary releases a growth hormone and it goes and acts on your long bones, make you tall. Right. So the effects are dependent on the programmed response of the target site, how your cell has to respond. Hormones are just molecular triggers, and basic categories we have already understood. Now let us move about talk about the endocrine that we are going to study in our standard 10 syllabus. It is also similar in standard 8. So pure endocrine organs are pituitary, pineal, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal glands, and endocrine cells in other glands like pancreas is a dual gland. It has got both endocrine and exocrine function. Thymus generally disintegrates with the puberty. Gonads, they have all mixed hormones. They have steroid hormones, right? And hypothalamus, they have other functions also. It's not only gland, they have other functions also. And hypothalamus is the part of brain, as I've already told you, and they releases certain factors which stimulates the pituitary to release certain hormones. Okay, this is important. Let us move ahead. Now, endocrine glands, we are going to study the only things which are in red is there in our syllabus, right? Hypothalamus, remember, it's a part of brain. It controls pituitary. Okay, that is why we study hypothalamus in endocrine also. It's a part of brain. The next one is the adrenal gland. Adrenal gland, any glands, if you see, has a that is outermost layer that is called the capsule. The next one is cortex and the inner one is medulla. Same way we have it in kidney, right? Renal capsule, renal cortex, renal medulla. Here we have adrenal capsule, adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla. Medulla releases certain set of hormones and cortex releases certain set of hormones. ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone released by pituitary. That is effective on the cortex. Okay. And your sympathetic nervous system is controlled by this release from the medulla. We'll talk about it. If you talk about the location, it is located as a cap over both the kidneys. There are cap-like structures present on top of each kidney, consist of two parts, central medulla and peripheral cortex. The adrenal medulla secretes adrenaline and noradrenaline or norepinephrine, right? It is a fight, flight, and fright hormone. You can call it 3F hormone. Okay, 3F hormone. F means fright, flight, and fight. So this is also called a stress hormone in animals or human beings. Okay, when you are emotionally stressed, when you are excited, when you are angry, this hormone is released. Adrenal gland is stimulated by the nerve endings of the autonomic nervous system, generally the sympathetic nervous system. Okay. Now the difference, adrenaline and non-adrenaline. Non-adrenaline basically is a neurotransmitter. Adrenaline or epinephrine increases the rate of the blood circulation. Breathing rate and carbohydrate metabolism increases because under stress your body requires more sugar, more oxygen, more blood. Because blood is the fluid which is actually transporting everything to the place where it's needed. For example, if you run away from the situation, so the muscles should get enough oxygen should get enough carbohydrate, that is glucose, so that energy can be produced. So that is done by adrenaline. It is produced by adrenal medulla and the sympathetic nerve, and it is exclusively produced by adrenal medulla. It normalizes BP. That is, always remember, children, whenever the question is asked based on the activity of sympathetic nervous system or adrenaline or parasympathetic nervous system or non-adrenaline, do not write it decreases. Because if your normal heartbeat is say 72, it decreases, that means what? It's a problem. So when it is elevated by the sympathetic nervous system under stress condition, it has to come back to the normal. That is important for the important function for the other set, that is non-adrenaline or a parasympathetic nervous system. So it decreases the heartbeat to the normal. That is the answer. Normalizes heartbeat, and antihistamine effect is what? When you have any kind of allergy, no? So inflammation could reduce. It reduces the inflammation and all. That is antihistamine effect. Function of adrenaline increases the heartbeat accompanied by increased BP, increases blood supply to the muscles, more glucose is released, and adrenal cortex secretes many other hormones. But the best known is cortisone. Now here I have started with the adrenal cortex. Till that time it was all about adrenaline. Now adrenal cortex is what? The outer layer. It secretes the hormones which is called cortisone, and it suppresses inflammations. Right? The cortisones, if you say cortical hormones, are of two types: mineralocorticoids. As the name suggests, it regulates the metabolism of minerals like sodium and potassium. And glucocorticoids, as the name suggests, carbohydrate metabolism and fat metabolism is taken care of by the glucocorticoids. This is an important part because there is a question like hyposecretion and hypersecretion of cortisols. What happens then? Okay. You can see here different hormones are released. Androgen is also a very important hormone that is also released by the cortex. Okay, and the cortical hormones, what it does, it increases the blood glucose. Then it influences the fat and protein metabolism. Now, if you have less of glucose, then fat and protein are the only molecules which give you energy. So, what regulates these molecules to produce energy? That is your cortical hormones. It regulates the salt and water. Salt is what? Sodium ions. So, sodium ions, potassium ions, they are all regulated by the mineralocorticoids. Adapts the body to stress like heat, cold, burn, infection. In all these cases, the cortisols play a very important role. In some cases, it behaves like sex hormones, androgens, which helps in premature sexual maturity. Now, when you talk about Addison's disease, there's a trick to remember. Addison's is A. Cushing syndrome is C. Now, alphabetically, A comes first and then C. So, A is lesser than C. So, A is for hyposecretion of adrenal corticotropic hormones, and B and C is for hypersecretion, that is Cushing syndrome. So, hyposecretion causes Addison's disease, and hypersecretion of cortisols causes Cushing syndrome. So, causes Addison's disease, loss of energy. Now, in this case, what? There is no cortisol. So, your body is very lethargic, weak, less of glucose. So, energy is not there. So, glucose is not there. So, you can visualize this image, that will be easy to understand. So, loss of energy, skin pigmentation, then you have nausea, right? Breathing rate is no less. Hypoglycemia, please avoid this rate, loss of rate, loss of this one is not needed. Okay, that is wrong. I'll just strike it out. Okay. This is not to be, this is something misprinted. Nausea and all is there. Nausea is what? When you tend to have convulsions and vomit-like tendency. Then sugar level is also low. Sensitivity, you feel very cold, you feel lots of pain, and you are very susceptible to infection and falling sick. So if you have less of the cortisols, then also there is a problem. If you have more, then remember this fellow, Cushing syndrome. Cushing is hypersecretion of corticotropic hormones. Then that leads to obesity. There was weakness. The person is weak and thin. Here the person will be obese. That is fat. Hyperglycemia, sugar level will be high. Then osteoporosis, bone will be weak. Right? Weakness, salt retention. So salt retention and salt and water retention leads to what? That is edema. That is water accumulation. Then adrenal virilism is a syndrome which excessive adrenal androgens are released. Now, androgens, as I told you, mimics the sex hormones. So generally, what happens if it mimics the sex hormones in females, they tend to develop the beard and the mustache. And if it happens in the male, they tend to develop breast-like structures. That is called gynecomastia. Okay, adrenal virilism is the development of premature male characteristics caused by androgens excessively released by the adrenal gland. And this disorder can occur before birth and can lead to sexual abnormalities in the newborn, or it can happen later in girls and women, which leads to excessive hair growth on the face. That is like the males. Right. Then stress responses. During what happens whenever there is stress, your brain senses the stress. It helps in the release of a hormone called ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, and that helps in increasing the diameter of your windpipe so that more and more air can enter in your lungs. Then that also helps in increase of the heart rate so that more and more blood supply can happen to your required organs. The liver will convert glycogen into glucose. So the excess amount of glucose is released in the blood. Then there's decreased digestive system activity, that is a symptom of stress. And then you have high blood pressure, so because the blood has to rush to the different organs. This is the stress response of adrenaline. Then you talk about pancreas. Pancreas is a dual gland. This question is very common. Why it is a dual gland? Because it functions as endocrine as well as it functions as exocrine. Now, when it functions as endocrine gland where the function is what? It releases hormones like insulin, glucagon, uh, somatostatin, and similarly when it is an exocrine gland, exocrine matlab digestion related, so it releases enzymes which helps in the breakdown of food particles that you eat. So pancreatic amylase, trypsin, lipase, these are released by the pancreatic juices, which is the exocrine function of the pancreas, by the ducts of Echini. Similarly, there are islets of Langerhans, which has got different types of cells: alpha cells for glucagon, beta cells for insulin, and delta cells for somatostatin. Though delta cell is not in your syllabus, somatostatin, but somatostatin helps in controlling your height. That much awareness we should have. Somatotropin is a growth hormone released by pituitary, and somatostatin is a growth inhibitor released by your pancreas delta cells. Alpha cells, glucagon, and beta cells, insulin. If I say glucagon, where glucagon, glucose has gone to the blood. So the level of glucose in the blood increases. Insulin, matlab the blood का जो glucose है, it has come in the cell. That is insulin. So the level of glucose will decrease in the blood. Understood? So the function of insulin and glucagon together is to control the blood sugar level throughout the day. Right. Now, when you talk about the pancreas, it is about 6 inches long and it sits across the back of the abdomen. The head of the pancreas is on the right side of the abdomen and connected to the duodenum, the first section of the small intestine, right? And the small intestine, right? So here you can see this question is asked in the exam that what is the location of pancreas? Now, what is the location of pancreas? Pancreas is located in the loop of duodenum behind the stomach. This is the perfect and the only accepted answer. Pancreas is located in the loop of duodenum behind the stomach. Okay. Now, pancreas has got insulin, that is beta cells. Insulin is a hormone made by the pancreas that allows the body to use sugar, that is glucose. Insulin keeps your blood sugar, that is from it. It doesn't allow the blood sugar to increase. Basically, insulin is like a doorkeeper who allows the sugar to enter into the cells, right? And glucagon goes and interacts with the glycogen which is stored in the liver, converts the glycogen into glucose, send it into the blood, so the level of glucose increases in the blood. Now, insufficient secretion of insulin leads to a disease condition called diabetes mellitus, a very important disease for the exam, because diabetes mellitus and diabetes insipidus. There are two types of diabetes in your syllabus. right? So diabetes mellitus is hyposecretion of insulin, and diabetes insipidus is hyposecretion of adeno, that is antidiuretic hormone, ADH, also called vasopressin. Now, how high blood sugar level, that is hyperglycemia, affects the people who have diabetes? Urine loaded with sugar. Too much of frequent urination causes loss of water, which makes the person feel thirsty, loses weight, and sometimes person loses eyesight or vision because high glucose causes the lens of eyes to swell, which changes the ability to see. You know that what happens to the cell when it is placed in hypertonic solution and hypotonic solution. If your blood becomes hypertonic, then obviously the chances of the organs to fail or does not work increases. So diabetes itself is not a problem, but whatever problem it causes in the body makes the person sick. Over secretion of insulin, if you have too much of insulin secreted, then also it's problem because it reduces the glucose level in the blood. And hypoglycemia is very dangerous because your brain cannot understand anything other than glucose as a source of energy. So there are chances that we tend to move into coma or even death or unconsciousness when the glucose level drops. Right. So overdose of insulin gives diabetic person insulin shock. Now, suppose a person has to take one injection of insulin, but the person has taken two injections by mistake, or he forgot about the first injection and took the second injection, then the level of glucose will drastically fall. That may lead to insulin shock, and the person may faint and even slip into coma. Insulin do not convert glucose to glycogen. Always remember, insulin is a doorkeeper. It opens the doors of the cell so that the glucose can enter into the cell. So though insulin and glucagon work together to bring down the level of glucose or regulate the level of glucose in the blood, but their mode of action is different. Glycogen helps in conversion of glycogen to glucose, but insulin allows the glucose to get into the cell, then it is converted into glycogen for storage in liver cells. Glucagon is a peptide hormone produced by alpha cells. It works to raise the concentration of glucose in the bloodstream and fatty acids also. Breakdown of glycogen to glucose increases the blood sugar level. Somatostatin not in syllabus, but still it helps in regulating the height. Okay. Now, this is your regulation of blood glucose. I'll give you a better example. Yeah, this one is better to understand. Now, you can see here that when you eat cake, right? So, what happens? Cake mein glucose level increases in your blood. Now, as the level of glucose increases in the blood, it is sensed by hypothalamus. Then the sense what it triggers the pancreas to release insulin. Insulin will allow the cells to take in glucose. So liver cells will also take in glucose and will convert extra glucose into glycogen and store it for future use. And at the same time, other cells will take the glucose and use it for the energy production. And because of this intake of glucose in the cells, the level of glucose will come down to the normal condition. Now you are hungry. The situation is you are hungry, you have not taken glucose from a long period of time. So what happens? Your brain senses, hypothalamus senses that the glucose level is low in the blood. It makes the pancreas alpha cells. It triggers the alpha cells now. In the previous case, beta cells were triggered. Now the alpha cells will be triggered and glucagon will be released. Now glucagon will go and affect the liver. The target site for the glucagon is liver, where it converts the stored glycogen into glucose and again release that glucose in the blood, increasing the level of glucose in the blood. So finally the level will again come back to the normals. Understood? Moving to the next, the thyroid gland, very important, holding your neck. The butterfly sitting on your windpipe is the thyroid gland. Anterior to the neck on the trachea, just below the larynx. Pharynx first, larynx later in the throat region, right? Pharynx is the point of attachment where your eustachian tube, your nasal chamber, everything meets. Then you have larynx, the voice box. And just anterior to the voice box, you can see here, it is located as a butterfly holding the windpipe. There are two lateral lobes of the thyroid gland joined by a bridge, you can say, that is called the isthmus. It produces two hormone, thyroid hormone and calcitonin. Thyroid hormone releases a hormone called thyroxine, which helps in maintaining your basic metabolic rate, and calcitonin, which helps in the calcium and phosphorus metabolism. Now, some effects of thyroxine, it increases the basal metabolic rate, the rate at which the body uses oxygen, and it also affects many target cells throughout the body. Some effects are protein synthesis, bone growth, ossification, that is because of calcium metabolism. Then you have neural maturation, mental development, cell differentiation and growth. All these things are taken care of by the secretions of the thyroid gland. Okay. Now, homeostatic imbalances. Homeostatic imbalances means if your body is not having a proper balance of the reactions that is happening in your system. So there are two ways in which your basic metabolic system can be hampered. One is hypothyroidism, when you have less of thyroxine, and one is hyperthyroidism, that is more of um, thyroxine. So if you have hypothyroidism, always remember myxedema, goiter, and cretinism. All three diseases are hypo. Hyper is ophthalmic goiter or the exophthalmic goiter, or you have that is also called Graves' disease. Okay. Now there is only one hyperthyroidism where eyes protrude out. Rest all he is not Mendel, huh? He looks like that, but he is not Mendel. It's just a patient showing myxedema. That is your inflammation of the face. Okay. The myxedema in adults, myxedema, how will you remember? Myxedema, cretinism, C for cretinism, C for child. So cretinism occurs in children. And myxedema, adults. The myxedema happens in adults. The goiter is generally in the northern plains. Not now. Now to har namak mein iodine hai. So we don't have problem with the goiter. But northern plains mein the iodine content was low initially because they were not near the seaside. The seaside mein iodine content is higher. The northern plains mein people used to suffer from goiter a lot. It was endemic to the northern plains. Endemic means it was common to the northern plains because of lack of iodine in the diet. Right. So that is low iodine levels, say you have goiter. Goiter is what? Enlargement of the thyroid gland to produce more thyroxine, but that does not happen. So goiter is enlargement of the thyroid gland, myxedema and cretinism. These are the hyposecretions. Difference between myxedema and cretinism can be asked in the exam. Both are hyposecretion, one in adult, one in children. And hyperthyroidism, exophthalmic goiter, or Graves' disease. Now, this is cretinism. You can see here, this child is suffering from cretinism. This old man is suffering from myxedema. This is goiter, enlargement of the thyroid gland, and exophthalmic goiter. You can see the eyes are protruding out, right? Next one, the pituitary, the master gland. Now, master gland, it hangs on the base of the midbrain below the hypothalamus. A small P-shaped gland located at the base of the hypothalamus is pituitary. It has got two lobes, anterior and posterior. A has got many hormones. P has got two hormones. Okay. So anterior hormone adenohypophysis and posterior hormone neurohypophysis based on the stimulation they get. So adenohypophysis, there are 7 hormones. TSH, ACTH, FSH, LH, GH, PRL, and MSH. Now, these are all short forms. Full form can be asked in the examination. Thyroid stimulating hormone, adenocorticotropic hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, growth hormone, prolactin, melanocyte stimulating hormone, antidiuretic hormone, oxytocin. Another name of ADH is vasopressin. Another name of oxytocin is pitocin. If you remember, fine. Otherwise, let's see. So there, in this case, the first 4 are the tropic hormones because they regulate the action of other endocrine glands. So tropic hormones secreted by pituitary are 4. That is TAFL. What is that? TAFL. TSH, ACTH, FSH, and LH. TAFL. Thyroid stimulating hormone, adenocorticotropic hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. They are all targeting the other endocrine glands. That is why they are called tropic hormones. Oversecretion and undersecretion of these hormones can also lead to problem like hyposecretion of growth hormone will lead to dwarfism. So we'll study about it. These are the full forms I have already discussed. Now these are the locations and the release of the hormones. Let us talk about the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus releases certain factors which stimulates these tropic hormones, like thyroid releasing hormone or factor. then corticotropic hormone releasing factor, gonadotropic hormone releasing factor. So all these factors are released by hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is basically a boss to pituitary, and pituitary is the overall boss of the endocrine gland. Now, what is the role of pituitary? The four-tropic hormone regulate the function of other hormones. TSH, thyroid, it stimulates thyroid to produce thyroid hormone. ACTH stimulates adrenal cortex to produce corticosteroid and aldosterone and cortisols. Follicle stimulating hormone helps in the follicle growth and ovarian estrogen production, stimulates sperm production and androgen binding proteins. LH plays a very important role in ovulation. On 14th day, the level of LH increases, so ovulation happens. And growth of corpus luteum, that is also promoted by LH, stimulates androgen, and it also stimulates the testosterone from the interstitial cells or the Leydig cells in males. So LH not only plays an important role in female, it has some role in males also. Now, growth hormone promotes mitosis and cell division. You can see here in this person, the growth hormone has worked too much. Here, there is less of growth hormone. This is a normal individual. Elongation of long bones, healing of wounds, lack of human growth hormone retards growth, hypersecretion in youth. When a person has attained its height and then also the growth hormone is being released, the person suffers from gigantism, right? Hyposecretion in childhood is dwarfism, and hypersecretion in adults is acromegaly. So you can see that youth means the child is still growing. So you can say that gigantism or dwarfism. These two happens when the children, if it is more or less. And once a person has attained the adulthood, no more increase in height, then it is acromegaly. Only the lower jaw increases in size, the fingers, the limbs increase in size. From the posterior pituitary, ADH, antidiuretic hormone, also called vasopressin, stimulates the kidney to reclaim more water from the kidney, that is reabsorption of water. So it helps in regulating the concentration of water in the body. Osmoregulation of kidney depends upon ADH. So if you have more of ADH, then the urine will be concentrated. And if you have less of ADH, that is the hyposecretion of ADH, then the person tends to suffer from diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus is what? Too many times the person has to visit the washroom. That is polyuria. That is multiple times urination. Oxytocin promotes the contraction of the smooth muscles in the reproductive tract in female, initiating the labor and ejection of milk in the babies. The oxytocin also plays a very important role for the uterine contraction during the parturition, that is delivery of the baby. Pituitary or the posterior lobe, oxytocin stimulates the smooth muscle contraction, uterus and the mammary gland, and ADH stimulates the water reabsorption. Very important. Diabetes insipidus, very important. It was there in your specimen paper also. If you put everything together, you can take a screenshot of this slide. It will give you the brief of the entire hormones present in you. Right? So we have already discussed all these things. Let us move ahead. This is also the function of FSH, LH, TSH, ACTH, prolactin, growth hormone, ADH, OT, that is oxytocin. Pause the video here. Look at the functions, see that how much you know, and then we can move ahead. Diabetes insipidus and diabetes mellitus. I have taken this slide from pedia.com. Right? So here also you can find it. Diabetes mellitus. What you have to remember is hyposecretion of which hormone? Diabetes mellitus, hyposecretion of insulin. Uh, Diabetes insipidus, hyposecretion of ADH. ADH, the urine passed out is totally dilute, watery, with no glucose in it. But in case of diabetes mellitus, the glucose may be released in the blood, in the urine. So it is called glucose urea. And in this insipidus, urine do not contain glucose. Feedback mechanism, that is negative feedback. When the product itself, that is when the product regulates the release of the hormone, that is called the feedback. So in this case, negative feedback means when insulin released itself goes and stops the pancreas to release more insulin. It is called negative feedback. So what happens? There is a normal level of glucose in the blood. Glucose increases. If glucose increases, then the beta cells of pancreas is triggered. Now that releases insulin. As the insulin releases, insulin will allow the cells of liver and other cells to take in glucose and convert into glycogen and store it for further use. So the glucose comes to the normal level after the storage. Once it is to the normal level, the insulin will be stopped, right? That is, as the level of glucose drops, insulin is stopped, and as the level of glucose drops, glucagon takes over. So they together bring down the effect of maintaining a normal glucose level in the blood. In the same way, negative feedback mechanism, thyroid stimulating hormone, very important. Hypothalamus releases a factor called TRH, which is called thyroid releasing hormone or thyroid releasing factor. It promotes the pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone makes the thyroid release thyroxine. When the thyroxine level increases to the certain level, it goes and gives a negative feedback to the hypothalamus. Now the hypothalamus feels that the level of insulin is, level of thyroid TSH is reached. So it will stop TRH, which will further stop TSH, and finally thyroxine level will be stopped. The thyroxine release will be stopped. So the level is maintained. This is called negative feedback of TSH. Similarly, there is a positive feedback. Like, for example, if a baby has to be delivered, there's a release of oxytocin. This oxytocin helps in the contraction of the uterus. And upon the contraction of the uterus, more of oxytocin is released to promote more contraction so that the baby is delivered. So here that is the product, is making the hormonal release, increasing the hormonal release. Okay, so this is called the positive feedback. Brain stimulates pituitary to release oxytocin. Oxytocin is carried to the uterus. Oxytocin stimulates uterine contraction and pushes the baby. Head of the baby pushes against the cervix, and this nerve again stimulates more of oxytocin release. So here oxytocin release triggering the more oxytocin released. So there are three mechanisms by which the hormones work. Now this must be very clear to you. One is humoral, that is the release happens in the blood. From the blood it goes to the target site. One is neural, where the nerve stimulation is required, like for adrenaline. And hormonal is like tropic hormones. That is, one hormone is released from one gland, that is pituitary releases TSH. It goes and triggers the thyroid. So one hormone triggers the another hormone release. Right? So this is what your how the hormones work in your system, right? You can see here the tallest man with the shortest one. And with this, we are done with the chapter. Thank you so much. Happy learning, and put it in the comment section that you have not understood anything. I will try to solve the problem. Thank you, children. Study well.